When I graduated from RISD, I had for 2 years in the summer worked as the assistant to the museum. Anyway, I was there for 5 years and I got kind of tired of all the technical stuff I was doing. And the director of the museum became a very good friend of mine, and he knew I was getting a little bored, so he asked me what he could do to make it a little happier for me. And I said, I am constantly being stopped by art students who want to know more about photography. And I'd like to have them an informal, non-credit course on a Friday afternoon. So they announced it, and I had about 12 students, I think, the first time. And I got so intrigued with that the last year that I was there, I asked if they could make it a credit course for 1 credit, and they did. And I had a slightly smaller group, but they were much more ambitious, and they somehow found a darkroom somewhere that they could work in. And I got hooked. And just in a 1 credit course, I got really hooked on what fun it was to teach. And one day, one of the students came in with a copy of a magazine called Aperture. And on the back page of Aperture, it said that Minor White, who was the editor of the magazine, was moving from California to the newly formed George Eastman House at Rochester. And the students were so impressed with this magazine that they asked me if I would try and find out if it was possible to come to Rochester and visit with this man. So I got a phone number and I called, and I finally got a hold of Minor, and I said, I've got 4 students that would love to come to visit with you some weekend. And so he agreed to that, and about a month later, we drove to Rochester, and we met with Minor late in the evening. And the next day, he had us come to Eastman House, introduced us to Beaumont Newhall, and on Thursday of that week, I had a phone call from Beaumont, and he asked me if I'd like a job at Eastman House. And I spent most of the summer staying in Minor's apartment, living on a cot in the hallway. And every day that I could get free, I was looking for a place to live. So he and I became close friends, and he started to realize that I could help him with designing in Aperture and whatever. So I informally became the designer, co-designer of Aperture for 5 years. I worked at Eastman House for a year, and Beaumont knew I was getting bored with that, so he in turn asked me what he could do to make life a little bit more interesting for me, and I said, well, I'd like to have a workshop 1 night a week here at the house for anybody that'd like to come in and talk about photography. And I enjoyed every bit of it. And at the end of the 10 weeks, I was kind of unhappy because it was over. And the following week, Beaumont had a phone call from a guy by the name of C.B. Nablet. And I'd never heard of C.B. Nablet. But anyway, he said he wanted to talk with me. And I got on the phone, and he said, I'm C.B. Nablet. I'm the head of the photography department at the Rochester Institute of Technology. 2 of my faculty members had taken your workshop, and they recommended that I hire you. He said, would you come in? I'd like to have a talk with you. So the following week, I went in to have a talk with him after talking to Beaumont, who told me that RIT was a valid school. So I went in and I spent an hour talking to C.B. Nablet. The following week he called and he offered me a contract. I told June about it, and June said, well, we can't live on that amount of money. So I called him back and I said, well, I'd have to have more money. And he says, well, I don't have any more money. So I forgot about it. In late August, he called me back again. He says, I found some money. He said, school starts September the 8th. So I had to ask Beaumont if he'd let me go, which he did graciously. And so that's how I came to RIT, and that's how I got hooked on the idea of really teaching as a living. This wonderful guy is Bob Gunlock, who's been a friend for many, many years, and I met him through the Xerox company and working with all this marvelous procedure that I've been working with. He's also a genius who has, I don't know how many million patents in his name. I have been involved with Bob since early on. I somehow by magic from Xerox had this equipment delivered to me to work with and try and work with as an art form. This is the heart of the technical part of the process of making the images. This plate has light-sensitive selenium on an aluminum piece of metal. Now I'll make it light-sensitive by putting it in this charging unit. And there's a wire that's running up and down here and charging that plate with 4,000 volts. I have to protect it from the light of the room to bring it to the camera by putting a dark slide in. Now I'll take it into the camera and we'll make an exposure. I've got the image the way I want it to be in terms of focus. I looked at the ground glass and I like the image. Put it in. I pull the slide. And I'm going to give this an 8-second exposure. Now I put the slide back in because I'm going to bring it out into the light and it would spoil the exposure that I've just made. This tray has hundreds of tiny glass beads and Xerox toner. The beads are called carriers and they roll the toner across the plate, and as they do that, those areas which have been exposed to the light will reject the toner. And those areas which have not been exposed to the light will still have a charge, and they will hold the toner to the plate. This unit, by the way, was one of the inventions of Bob Gunlock. I very carefully put the paper on the surface, and the reason for that is if I move the paper, it will move the toner around. Now the paper is being subjected to 4,000 volts, and that will make the toner come from the plate up onto the paper. And we have an image. Give it about 6 seconds. And the heat has melted the plasticizer on the toner into the paper. Perfect. I love things. I love the visual aspect of the world. I rarely see things that I can't find some beauty in. And beauty is not a dirty word to me. Beauty is something to just inhale and exhale.
So what was it about xerographic art that made you step away from photography and wholly embrace xerographic art as you have?
Laziness.
I doubt that.
No, it wasn't that. The beauty of working with the Xerox process was its immediacy. And I've always loved the blacks in black and white photographs. And I found that I could get blacks that were as rich or richer than any of the blacks that I was able to get with any of the photographic papers I could get. I told you about my project with students of photographing a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. So I set this as an assignment for myself. I'd never done it with xerography before. This is on colored stock, and then it's black toner, and then in register white toner. This print was in a show at the Museum of Modern Art.
As an educator and a mentor, Charlie Arnold has planted so many seeds over the 31 years of his caring with his students. I'm just one of them, George Cochran.
I enjoy myself, and I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy my life, and I'm a happy man. And you can't be happy